So this one, and I think Beat might actually join us on air for this because I was honestly sort of like, okay, I don't know enough about this to be like, why is this guy so upset? So this came in from Bleeding Cool, and this is that there was the cover of Justice League of America number 23, done by Doug Mankey, featured the current baddie of the series, the Queen of Fables, in close combat with Promethea, the character created by Alan Moore and J.H. Williams III for the America's Best comic series, Promethea. Now, apparently there were some things that were said about this that like I guess he didn't know about it.
Okay, so taking a step back, America's Best Comics was a comics imprint that was created at Wildstorm Comics back in the mid to late 90s. I'm trying to remember exactly when. That's where Alan Moore did his comic series League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, was publishing through that, but that was separate from ABC, which was Tom Strong, Promethea, the Top 10, all of these things that played to more strength of world building, character building, the way he did storytelling. Gray Shirt, I think, was another one. And he worked with a lot of creators. So there's some discussion as to whether or not the characters were work for hire or if there was a share ownership with the artists and stuff, like what you'd find on a Mark Miller deal with the people that he works with on his stuff, like Kick-Ass and stuff, was with John Romita, and Wanted is with J.G. Jones, I think. So Wildstorm was a separate entity from. It was still, I think, at Image at that point, but it was Jim Lee's imprint at Image and had grown very big, and they had gotten other creators in. They had done some stuff with. They did an homage line where they had Terry Moore publishing Strangers in Paradise for a while, and they did some other stuff. Esther City used to be at Homage and at Wildstorm. When Alan Moore went to Wildstorm to do this, one of the things was that he had a bad working relationship with DC, mostly having to do with how they treated him with Watchmen and how that was supposed to revert to his rights at some point. And because they found a loophole of keeping the trade paperback in print forever, not necessarily a bad thing because the book continues to sell after 30 years in crazy ways, but they never have to give him the ownership of the characters and the book back. He also had some falling outs with Marvel. I do remember Joe Quesada had done some things to try to correct that and fix it, and then there were some other hiccups. And so when Marvel did the reprints of Miracle Man, which was a character that was created by Moore under Marvel UK's line, and the rights had sort of kind of gotten around from Eclipse to then getting bought out by Todd McFarlane to then having a court loss against Neil Gaiman for other things. Neil Gaiman essentially got the rights over to Marvel to let them publish the stuff. Alan Moore didn't want his name on it, and Marvel respectfully, I guess we're going to go with, said okay, and they didn't put Moore's name on it. They just called it by the original creator or the original writer, I think is what they put down in the credits for it. But DC is just kind of never really wanted to do right by Moore. A few years ago, they did the Watchmen prequels that were not well received. While there may be a couple of the books and a couple of creators in particular who did okay stories and stuff, nobody really was saying, oh, what we need is a series of Watchmen books that take place before Watchmen. Although it's kind of hard to do stuff after Watchmen. You would think, and I believe part of the deal with Watchmen was that they were never allowed to do a sequel unless they got Moore's okay. So they're not doing a Watchmen sequel. They're integrating the Watchmen characters into the DC universe right now by having Dr. Manhattan be the reason for the DC rebirth, having Ozymandias showing up, having a version of Rorschach show up, introducing some other characters that are kind of like the Watchmen in the amalgams of Punch and Julie, in this mime and whoever else the other character is. So they're just like pissing on any respect for Moore that they may have once feigned to have. Moore is just old cranky pissed off Brit who's doing sex magic in his dungeon, but he's still kind of considered one of the gods of comic creation. and you're either a fan or you're not. I'm not a huge fan, but Moore worked with other people. And so in the case of Promethea, for instance, he worked with J.H. Williams III. Now, part of J.H. Williams doing Sandman Overture from a couple years ago with Neil Gaiman was supposed to be that there was going to be a Promethea omnibus kind of thing that was going to come out. And this version of Promethea, the book, was very weird. The layouts were all supposed to be sideways splash pages. There was a big thing with the 90s where they would turn pages on their sides. McFarlane did it a lot with Spider-Man. So they were trying to find a way to package this, and it was going to be difficult, but was also very exciting. If you were a fan of the Promethea book, then you were looking forward to this. That was apparently part of the deal.
No, wait. When you say sideways splash page, do you mean like this?
Yes.
Like literally holding the book on its side.
But opening it up and having two of those pages together, so the artwork is reading downward as opposed to across. Okay. All that said, the stickiness is that does J.H. Williams own any of the rights to the character with Moore? And I think when ABC with Wildstorm got acquired by DC Comics, and Moore's like, well, then fuck ya, and mostly walked off, except for he was finishing some stuff with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which, again, DC kind of fucked him because they edited some stuff that they weren't supposed to edit out of his book, an ad or something that was in one of the issues. And he's like, he was just livid about it in an Alan Moore way. But he wasn't really wrong, because it was, again, the promise that his stuff wasn't going to be interfered with. And that all got screwed because Jim Lee, first chance he got, just sold out the whole kit and caboodle to DC, became a big editor over there, and didn't do anything to appease his relationship with Alan Moore and the promises that he made with him, and is now actively part of the company that is screwing him and the other creators that worked with him on these ABC books. So does J.H. Williams have any stake in Promethea other than the fact that he is a co-creator of the character and had expectations that were laid out? And in the end, at the very least, you could have just said, hey, we're thinking about using Promethea in Justice League. How is that with you? How do you feel about it? Or we just want to let you know. They didn't. They didn't do any of that. Whether it's a legal issue and he has to take him to court, or it's just a respect issue, why do you want to piss off J.H. Williams? Like, it's one thing to piss off Moore because Moore's just made to be pissed off. Why do you want to piss off J.H. Williams and do this? And do it in such a way that really doesn't bring anything to the Promethea character and story as it existed. I have not read Promethea, but as I understand it, it started out as being what people looked at as like, oh, so Alan Moore's doing a Wonder Woman kind of thing. On the surface, that was what you were expected to think. As it went along, the artwork, like many more things, became much deeper, much more ingratiated. Some people have described it as a magic spell in comic book form. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing, as you read it across, it becomes like you're getting to become part of the spell. It's kind of like when Grant Morrison broke the fourth wall with Animal Man, except taken to a higher degree. And this is not the only case, because DC also is planning on involving Tom Strong, another ABC property, and some of the characters from that story in their new The Terrifics comic that's coming about, which is under the bannerhead of Jim Lee and Dan DiDio. So he can't act like he doesn't know any about this. And that comic's co-creator, Chris Sprouse, who I think also wrote some Tom Strong stuff after Moore decided he wasn't going to write it anymore, they didn't let him know either. So, no, sorry, J.H. Williams, we're not asking you permission. We're not telling you. We're not being respectful to you as a creator. So maybe you'll never want to work with us again. Oh, hey, Chris Sprouse, kind of the same thing over here. Again, don't know if Sprouse has any kind of legal standing with the character, but just, god damn it, show some fucking respect to the creators who've worked for you in the past, who could work for you in the future, and just in general, don't Jack Kirby motherfuckers like that. But this seems to be the state that DC's in. Last year, going back even further, there was a character that was going to be introduced, I think, again in Justice League. I don't know if it was by the same creator. That character was called Kid Eternal, Kid Endless. That's what it was, Kid Endless. And it was a character that was meant to look and be evocative of the Endless characters by Neil Gaiman. You know who didn't get a call about that? Neil fucking Gaiman. Neil Gaiman had to be side blasted by it on the internet by people saying, "Hey, have you seen this Kid Endless guy? Isn't that weird? Or did you have anything to do with the creation of this character that's so obviously based off of your characters, and your relationship with DC all this time has been, hey, if you're ever going to do anything with Sandman or the Endless, talk to me first and make sure I'm okay with it, and I'll keep doing work with you. Otherwise, you fuck me over, I'm going to fucking leave. I'm going to take my toys as I have them and go home," which is not he can take Sandman, because he can't, because he doesn't own the character. But it's just a respect thing. It's I'm not saying you can never do anything with Sandman. I'm just saying, fucking talk to me first. Fucking let me know, and we'll hash it out. Give me the first chance to peruse it. And goddamn, that Kid Endless character disappeared from that storyline real fast. Did not happen because Neil Gaiman is someone that they still want to work with. Or I think Beat even mentioned he's got a social following that would rip DC to shreds, and was starting to do that. I don't think people are stepping up in the same way for J.H. Williams, and I don't think they're stepping up the same way for Chris Sprouse. They're not stepping the same way for the ABC properties. One, because they're not at the same level as what Sandman was. As good as they were, and as many people who were fans of them were, they were a product of a certain time, and they've kind of disappeared. And as I mentioned earlier, just trying to get the collections out is taking time. They could do this with the Starman character that James Robinson did. And James Robinson works for DC. So they could probably just look over and say, "Hey, James, we'd like to bring Jack Knight in and do some shit with Starman. How do you feel about that?" "Well, I feel like it's fucking stupid because he doesn't make sense in the context of current continuity or, in the times, because he was obviously a very 90s character. And I wrote him a really good beginning, middle, and end. But do what you're going to do, I guess." But if instead they just say, "Hey, let's put Starman in this." "Well, should we turn around and talk to James? He's right fucking there." "No, fuck him." Then that would be, that would be par for the course for what DC is doing right now, is that there is a lack of respect for the people who made these characters. And it's kind of up to them. It's up to them if they want to pay those respects or not. It seems like I would not want to work for a company who disrespected creators. If I'm doing creative work for them, I don't think that my longevity is going to be there with that. The guy who created iZombie is not working DC, left DC, stop working for them, not because of iZombie, but because of the Before Watchmen stuff.
Yeah.
Because he said, "Hey, this is how you treat Alan Moore. Of all people, this is how you treat Alan Moore." And Dave Gibbons. Because Dave got screwed on that whole deal too. He's like, "I don't really think I want to work for people who do that." So he took off, and people thought it was strange. You're just now kind of getting a name for yourself. Your properties are just starting to pick up. But he's like, "No, this is not for me. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't condone it. And I cannot in good conscience work with people who do." And it's unfortunate because there were people that were in place for a long time. Paul Levitz is one. Archie Goodwin is another. Karen Berger would probably never stand for this shit, but was not in the same position of power and everything. Those people don't exist anymore in DC's walls. And it's just, some of them passed away, but it's just really sad because the legacy of DC is people like Jeff Johns, who usually, we think, seems very respectful towards comic stuff that came before. So that Jeff Johns is part of this and is utilizing this shit in Doomsday Clock right now with the Watchmen stuff doesn't really put Jeff Johns high on my respect list. The Jim Lee is doing this. The Dan DiDio is doing this. Not really loving them either. Plus, fuck them. All their new fucking books are ripoffs of Marvel anyway. Although Terrifics looks really cool. Doug Mankey, I think, is coming at it from the perspective of a writer who is a fan. I think he's doing it because he's got a story that he wanted to tell and he thought it would be really exciting to do this Promethea thing. So I'm not laying the blame on him because I haven't heard his statement yet. But he does seem like the kind of guy who's just like, wouldn't it be cool to get to do this? And that this is the reaction that's coming up. Maybe he should have called. Well, he probably couldn't have called Alan because Alan's fucking somewhere out there on the astral plane right now. But maybe he should have called J.H. Williams, or maybe he just didn't know. Maybe he didn't think that this was a problem because they are probably, someone said, "Oh, we own that. Do what you want." You know, like maybe whoever was trying to do the Kid Endless thing, same thing. Oh yeah, go ahead, sounds great. And like the people who were supposed to look out for this sort of thing to keep the creators happy with the company didn't do it. They didn't step up. They laxed in their judgment. But knowing what we know now, like, has anybody called JH? Has anybody called Sprouse? I don't know. I'm not privy to that. I see a lot of people say, well, it's work for hire, so it doesn't matter. You know, and maybe that's true. Maybe it is just work for hire. And in that case, sure, you can say it doesn't matter because of that. But that's not what they really came in thinking.
Yeah.
And again, work for hire doesn't mean disrespect the person. If you got a fucking job at McDonald's and you go in every day and you make the fries, just because it's your job doesn't mean that people should also disrespect you, and it doesn't matter what you think because you're just a fucking fry maker. No, treat people with fucking respect. And if you want them to continue working with you, especially you're very good at making the fries, we'd like to keep you around, give you a nickel raise or whatever, fucking do that. And maybe you don't say to the guy who quit 2 years ago, hey, by the way, we got a new fry guy now, and he's picked up on your recipe of adding just the same amount of salt, but a little dash of pepper like you used to do. And we just want to be sure that's okay with you. No, it's probably not going to happen. You fucking make the fries the way you make the fries. But in this case, this is J.H. Williams has done a lot of stuff at DC and should be looked at with more respect than what he's been treated at here. So if there's a legal issue with this, though, if there is a contest of do the creators get first pass to say yes or no to a project involving these characters, or if it's like, no, I co-own that character, no matter what you guys say, and we're going to go to fucking court about it, that's even worse. It's an even worse situation to an already bad situation. I'm not privy to it. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people who work at DC as creators should be looking at this and saying, what happens when I make something here? What happens when someone takes my storyline that I created from beginning to end, and yes, starred Justice League characters, but what happens when they take it directly from my book and do a script and make it into a movie, and then they give me no credit for it? Not even because it's a legal thing, but because of a respect thing. They don't put my name up on the screen with everybody else because I'm just a work for hire guy. Why would I want to work for this company? That's a big question to me, is how do you run your business? How do you treat your people? And this looks bad for DC. You know, I'm hoping it's something that it looks really bad and probably is really bad, but that they fix. That they take the time and they take the care and they go and they do something to try to make it right. But at this point in time, we've seen no statements. We've just seen Bleeding Cool bitch about it. And that is kind of what Bleeding Cool does. Yeah. But when I see the reactions from JH on his Twitter and his Facebook stuff, and I see the same thing from Sprouse going, shit, I didn't know about this stuff with Tom Strong. It's not like they can deny that it's happened. It's just they have to figure out how to react afterwards. And I hope they do the right thing, whatever that is.
Yeah.
To chime in here, it isn't Angela, Miracle Man, Todd McFarlane bad, talking of respect and who owns what. But the thing is, it doesn't make sense in the context of a closed universe like Prometheus was. And big spoiler, Prometheus was 8 different incarnations in the comics. So which Promethea? And how does that fit in? So respect aside, just story-wise and otherwise, how does it fit? How does it make any sense to include them into the Justice League of America?
I heard a theory about the Promethea thing, again over on Bleeding Cool, which was that they, at the beginning of the storyline, they killed Vixen, and that they may utilize Vixen to come back in a form that is like Promethea, and kind of be a mix of her likeness and that likeness. Not permanently as well, but like kind of bringing that forward. But then we've got Tom Strong appearing in the Terrifics. So it's a question. Like when they involved Daniel from Sandman in the Justice League a few years ago, and they got the okay from Neil to do it, it's like, yeah, but fucking Sandman in the Justice League, or Death in Superman, I think was before that. You hear it and you go, well, how does that work? But then you see it and you go, oh, well, this is actually kind of cool, because they involved Neil in the stories, and they say, hey, what do you think about this? One, is it okay with you if we do it? And two, do you have any input on it? And he looks at it and he's like, oh, that's actually really cool. I like that. Or may I make a suggestion? One, thank you for coming to me. And two, this is something that I would think would happen here and maybe make it a little bit better. That's how it should work, because it keeps everybody happy, and it could make the story even stronger. It's just weird that that's not how they go.
Well, the thing is that it started out with the Green Lantern story that Geoff Johns did that also contained parts of Alan Moore's run on it. Is it personal? I don't know what's up there that they go so hard after Alan Moore's creations.
Well, the Green Lantern thing is a little different to me, because the Green Lantern was not an Alan Moore creation. It's him playing in the sandbox of Green Lantern.
Sure, but
and
it's
so
still
picking up past storylines and stuff is something the comics always do. I don't think he even had a problem with that. I don't think he would.
But if it was just that case, okay, but it seems to be a pattern now after so many things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Johns is a continuity buff. So him coming up and picking up threads from that, it's like someone coming in. It's like Grant Morrison doing the stuff with Batman that he did, where he took like the oldest, weirdest Batman stories and brought them into the modern continuity in ways that, like, holy shit, like that's a weird pull. Or Neil doing it when they did the funeral for Batman after the whatever happened to the Cape Crusader, which, pull from an Alan Moore storyline to do something with Batman that Alan Moore did with Superman. That I think is more acceptable. But this was Alan Moore's actual creations, and Watchmen, while being essentially starting out as the characters from the Charlton Heroes, and then them taking them and remaking them in some ways because they knew the liberties they were going to take weren't going to work for those characters. That's a different story. Promethea and Tom Strong and all that stuff, it's different than Alan Moore wrote the Judgment Day comics for Rob Liefeld's Extreme Studios. But in all the Youngblood comics that came afterwards, Riptide was still dead because Alan Moore killed her. It's not ripping off Alan Moore at that point. It's just like, yeah, this is a story that we have to reference because it happened in our history. I get what you're saying. And I certainly think that if you're going to steal from somebody, you're going to steal from the most prolific people who have worked on those comics in the past. But I think that there's a big difference between one versus the other.
I don't really have an opinion on this because I don't know enough about Promethea, about the history here, to be enraged or be like, oh well.
No, that's exactly it. Is that I'm not enraged by it because I don't have enough details of it. And we're in an internet age of, oh, something happened, make your opinion known and scream to the rafters. I don't really go for that. There was some stuff said by an artist in the last couple of days, and I basically said, wow, that sounds like a really weird thing for someone to say. I sure would like if this comic book news site tried to contact that guy and get some clarification on what he actually maybe meant, and see if this is 100% as bad as it sounds, or if maybe it's just been blown out of proportion by people like this comic book news site. And then later on, the guy who wrote to the comic book news site and said, you guys are pieces of shit for blowing up what I said in a completely wrong context. Thanks for trying to ruin my fucking career, you assholes. By the way, you suck. Comic book news sites want to get hits. We're on a show. We like to get hits. I get that this should not,
just not in the face,
and does not affect everybody. It affects certain people. And all I have to come at with this is empathy for the creators.
Yeah.
I empathize with a person who feels slighted, especially for something that is a creation of theirs. They put years of work into, that they feel value in. Like, people bought this and loved this, and it wasn't the most popular comic in the world. And a lot of people have never heard of the ABC Comics line, have never heard of Promethea. And it's fine that you might not know anything about them, or might not know anything about the people who made them. That's all okay. All I'm looking at is, what if this happened to me? What if this happened to Levi? What if Levi had someone come around and take some of his creations and just do what they wanted? Actually, that kind of happened, but we treated it as fan service because that person was definitely a fan. And we were just like, oh, that's cool. That's cool that you did that. But it could have gone a very different way if it was just a person like, well, I'm just ripping off your shit and putting it on a t-shirt and selling it and making money off of it. That's, again, not what this is. And the DC may genuinely own these characters. It's just still the human thing to do is try to keep relationships good.
Yeah.
If you don't have an interest in keeping relationships good, I'm way less interested in supporting your company. But I don't know that that's what this is yet.
I mean, it also comes down to this thing too, that you could say, if they keep the relationships good to where, then that creator is more than likely to come back and create more things for this company.
Yep.
So that's sort of where I think ultimately where we're getting at with this.
Yeah, J.H. Williams is a brilliant artist. Chris Sprouse, one of my favorite artists. I love his style. So two people that I can't imagine, but I would not want to see this happen to someone who is not of their caliber. I would not want to see this happen to someone who's not at that level, because it's still, no matter what, it's an unfair, it feels like an unfair treatment. I can't say it is, because the details are not all available to me. And I'm just a guy giving his opinion on the internet, same as anybody else.
Mm-hmm. But for those that read the comic, put it in that context. Sophie Banks' deal with Jack Frost had more consent than this thing. Because if you have to steal that much, how creative are you, or bankrupt are you?
Yeah, I mean, 60, 75, 80 years of Superman comics, are you making great art, or are you just making more Superman comics? That's one thing. But you're right. The hardest part about things like Before Watchmen and Doomsday Clock is that they have to hold themselves up against the original Watchmen books by Moore and Gibbons and all the team that worked on that. And so far, nothing holds a candle to it. The movie doesn't. I'm sure whatever this HBO series is not going to. And even if it's great, it's never going to be that great, because that thing was the original.
Correct.
That thing did something incredible.
Damon Lindelof is making it.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to piss on everybody here, but I know what you mean. It's just that's the argument of what value do corporate comics have, and is there only value to original ideas in a world of movies that are remade every 13 years, or reboots or sequels or anything else? Is like, how much is it better to get that person who's making something new? How much better is Get Out versus Thor Ragnarok? They're both great movies in their own right. Is one of higher value because it's not a sequel? I don't know. That's not for me to say. I think enjoyment is enjoyment. But I certainly look at the art and storytelling involved in Watchmen, while still not one of my favorites. The skill and the thought that was put into it, Doomsday Clock, I just don't know is ever going to be looked at in that respect. It's taking something from something fantastic and putting it into something that's like, okay, yeah, but we want to tell this story. We want to sell a lot of books with Superman in them. And it's unfair to me to judge because I'm not reading it. But I'm looking at it, and it's not as intriguing, even as a thing that I had already kind of not into.
I feel it's like stripped off of its context. Like Watchmen was a comment on the superhero genre. What they didn't let him do with other characters, and then they use it, then implement it into that whole thing that he was kind of criticizing. Or
that's just it. Now, if it's the final nail in the head of one of the things I've had a problem with comics over the last 30 years has been that it's been so reverential to The Dark Knight Returns and to Watchmen. And it's just been like, oh, we need to make all the modern comics based off of those things because they were the apex of great comics. And it's like, yeah, they achieved incredibly complex, rich storytelling that sold millions and millions and are sort of the nadir of what everything looks up to in the comic industry. And I get that, but that's not all comics should be. It's certainly not what comics were before, and it's not what all comics should be after. If this is Jeff Johns saying, hey, we've been reverential to Watchmen for so long, and we've made our regular heroes, we've made Batman too much like Rorschach, we've made Superman too much like Osman. I don't really know that that's the case, but we've tried so hard to make our characters fit into this storyline. Now what we want to do, which is something I think Joe Kelly did with the Justice League, or with Superman, essentially with a bunch of characters that were kind of like Image characters, or what Mark Waid did with Kingdom Come, is we want to show what the Watchmen can't achieve standing up next to Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and Green Lantern. We want to show that these characters actually have a value that's beyond what the Watchmen was. If that's the story that he's trying to tell, to get past this, like now we close the door on these things and we go forward and we enjoy Superman as being Superman again, which is kind of what Rebirth has been doing anyways, I could get that. I could appreciate that. I could look at that and say, yeah, that's cool. I don't know that they needed to do it with the Watchmen characters, but it would make the greatest impact. Absolutely. But in the end, it's like, if you haven't read Alan Moore's Judgment Day book, which was at, I think it was Extreme at that point in time. I think it had gone, Rob Liefeld's Extreme Studios had left Image Comics, maybe it became Awesome Comics at that point, but it involved Youngblood and Supreme and the New Men and all these other things. Alan Moore took Rob Liefeld's characters that were, let's be honest, not well defined, and he did a storyline that told all of these very complex and interesting things and introduced a lot of new characters and gave new takes on some of the characters and books that existed, that actually gave them a definition, gave them a depth that they hadn't had at that point in time. To see what he could do with those in a similar way to what he'd done with Watchmen, what he then went on and did with his run on Supreme from Rob Liefeld Studios, that kind of shows what he was really good at, why he was considered a master storyteller. It's like, I made these Image guys look cool. I made, it's like going over and doing Little Lotta and Little Archie and Dot and all these characters from Harvey, and like doing something extreme with them, which I guess is kind of what Mark Andreyko did. Not Mark Andreyko, Robert Aguirre, doing the Life with Archie or Afterlife with Archie and stuff.
Yeah,
all of those things. It's like taking Archie and putting it into different contexts. That's kind of what Riverdale is. I don't necessarily love the context that they're doing it with, but I get what the idea was. And Alan Moore then did that with ABC. ABC was his final nail on it, because it wasn't just, I'm doing a Superman take or I'm doing a Wonder Woman take. It was a lot of, Grayshirt was kind of a pulp hero, but he brought something different to each one, and it just showed that he could excel at telling stories from any different kind of genre in comic book forms, especially if he had the right creator working with them. And it's masterful. Again, not for everybody, not always for me, but it was amazing work. And that's what I don't know that Johns has. Johns tells really good superhero stories, really good DC superhero stories. His Avengers stuff was kind of crap, but really good DC superhero stories in a way that is very entertaining, appeals to a wide audience, can be exciting, kind of falls apart in the end sometimes, but it's good. It's solid. He's a good guy to be in charge of DC for, bringing back to that classic feel. But he's not Alan Moore. And I don't think he would ever say that he's Alan Moore or a level of Alan Moore. He's probably made more money because his shit's still, printing checks. But whatever. Good for him.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.